Hello, everyone. This talk is about building Metro-style apps in C++ and XAML using Visual Studio Express. My name is Vikas Bhatia, and I'm a program manager in the C++ team, Visual C++ team.
I'm Joanna Mason, and I'm also a program manager, but I work on XAML tools and designers for XAML tools in Visual Studio.
All right, so let's get started. So what's our agenda? We're going to walk you through what's new for C++ development in Windows 8. Joanna's going to walk you through how to design a XAML-based UI for Windows 8. And once she's done designing the UI, I'll go in and plug in the C++ code to do the interaction that we need for the app. And while we're doing this, we'll try to communicate how to understand the life cycle of a Metro-style app in Windows 8 when you're doing C++. What we hope you leave with is an understanding of C++/XAML. What is this new thing? It's new for C++, everyone, right? So we want to hope you get an understanding of what is it the C++/XAML brings to you and how you can use it. And what tools does Visual Studio Express provide you to help build your apps. So let's just start with a demo. We have an app that we created. It's called Magical Music. It's finished right now. It's XAML over there, and you've got the designer on the top. But what we're going to do is we're going to launch it from the start menu, as users would. So you see that tile over there, it's called Magical Music. It gives you some stuff about your skill level. What are you, a maestro, or whatever. There's a keyboard on the bottom. It's a piano-based keyboard. The app's loaded up. You see some songs that you can play along with. Let's just do an info on the Frere jacket. Oh, the tap. Yes, thank you. Yes, we practiced this a million times. So let's just tap on the keyboard right there. So you can see this is multi-touch, right? As Metro-style apps are. When we design this app, Joanna's going to design the top left corner with the image and the text. We just show you how easy it is to do it in the designer. So let's just press the I over there. And you can preview the song. It just plays for you. So we're using NRD APIs over here. Let's just go to the play button. So this is like Tap Tap Revenge or Dance Dance Revolutions or any of those games that you've seen, right? So it's streaming down at you. There's some animation that we've done in XAML, so you can tap along. You can increase the volume. And depending on your skill level, you can play along. It's a cool game. You can slow down your speed if you want to.
Because I'm not doing very well there.
Right.
Really not very good.
That's probably her level. Or if you were, really ambitious, you can go all the way to the right. It's a fun app, right? And then what this app is actually doing is what we want to tell you about. So it's making the sound from the app rather than just capturing your key events and then seeing how you're playing. It's making the sound, and the microphone on the device is listening to the sound, and it's seeing whether you played the right key. Did you play an F or a B or a C sharp, in this case a C++? And it tells you, what your skill level is. It gives you the accuracy on the right. And this is the real-time processing that C++ is doing for you. It's making the sound, it's capturing it, it's analyzing it, and giving you feedback right away. So let's go back.
I think my accuracy was about 10%.
Yeah, let's not
That's pretty good.
It's okay.
Yeah.
So why did we use C++ XAML for this app? In general, if you want to design an app for today's marketplace, users are looking for a unique differentiated experience. They're looking for a pleasing user experience, in fact. And they want great performance. But they don't want to think that you've thought about performance. They just want performance to be there, right? So XAML provides you that capability to design your apps in a really easy streaming, animation, storyboards, everything that Joanna knows a lot about, visual state managers and everything. And it really is cool. It's easy to use too. And C++, as you know all these years, gives you the performance capability of memory mapping, good control of your object's lifetime. So this combination of C++ and XAML is what gives you the capability to design these new Metro-style applications, to create apps that your users will actually like and love. So how do we want to do this? We thought, okay, when we created the Magical Music app back in Redmond, we had a designer, we had a developer, they worked in tandem, and that's how we wanted to run this session as well. So she is a UI designer extraordinaire, and I'm your hacker beyond compare. See, that rhymed? We spent a lot of time on that one. So she's going to talk about designing this app now.
Yeah, so before we kick into that, I want to talk a little bit about XAML and also a little bit about the tools, but we'll start with XAML. So one of the reasons, that XAML and that I'm involved in this session is because, frankly, I know XAML, and we wanted to leverage that. And just like for people out there, how many people here, I'm curious, have written anything in XAML before? Have you used Silverlight, WPF, Windows Phone? Well, the good news, right, that you got from the keynotes and from all the big picture sessions is you can utilize all those XAML skills in your Metro-style applications. It's great because you don't have to relearn everything. You just completely can translate those skills right into the Metro-style UI. Another benefit of that is that the XAML is similar. It's not exactly the same, but the XAML is similar, so you should be able to reuse a lot of the assets that you've created in other applications. You might want to update them to make them a little more Metro style and have those fit in with the look and feel of Windows 8. But just knowing that you can utilize that stuff will really help make an efficient transition to this new platform paradigm. So for those of you who haven't used XAML before, I want to talk a little bit about why XAML is great and why using it to create your Metro apps is going to be a really good choice. The first thing about XAML is that it is going to give you all the power and expressivity that you would expect from a modern presentation platform. It has a declarative programming model where it separates the application logic from the user interface, just like many presentation frameworks do. In addition to that, XAML has a very rich set of controls that do all sorts of interesting things for you that have advanced layout capabilities. And if you just want to stack a bunch of things on top of each other, you can use a stack panel. For those of you that have been doing C++ programming for a while, sometimes getting some basic features and functionality, you might have to use some controls out of the box, but you want it to do a little something different. So you have to maybe capture some events or manually set some properties, or maybe you have to resort to an owner draw control. And with XAML, it's a little bit easier to customize and not only use the controls out of box, but also customize it a little bit. So let me give you 2 examples of some common, very simple scenarios that as a C++ developer. How many people are C++ developers? Woot! Yay, we love C++.
You're in the right room.
So one of the things that, I did C++ a while ago. I used to do C++ and MFC. So, there's just a couple scenarios, very basic. I just want this button, and I always want it on the right-hand side. Seems simple, right? Well, you have to write code to do that. You'd have to, set the values. In XAML, it's a matter of setting one property. All right, let's take another very simple example. I have a child window, and I always want it to be the same size as its parent. Seems like it should be simple. In XAML, there's this notion of auto-sized containers, and you can use auto-sized containers to do exactly what I just said. So you don't have to write custom code to get that behavior. It just works right out of the box. So those are some of the big benefits. There's also styles and templates so that you can you can have a consistent look and feel with your application by defining those things in resources. There's data binding. You can easily data bind to a data model, and you also have property-to-property data binding, which makes it really easy to form relationships between controls in your UI. And of course, there's rich animation. And the great thing about the animation in XAML, as you saw from the Metro-style controls that are available right in the box, is that you get all those great transitions and that really modern look without having to write any of that code. But if you did want to have your own look, another big benefit of XAML is that it's fully extensible, which is what you'd want. So if you have your own vision of what your application wants to look like, and you want to create a novel experience, you're given the capability to extend your user interface in the way that you want using XAML as well. Okay, so hopefully I've convinced you that XAML's awesome and that you're totally going to want to check that out. But what's better than XAML is using a designer to edit your XAML. And so that's really what we're going to be talking about today. And there's a couple things that I wanted to mention specifically about the XAML. The first thing is that the C++ designer for editing XAML is the exact same designer that you'll be able to use for C# or VB applications. So all of the features that we're showing here today also work for C# and VB. And I also have another session tomorrow, a deep dive on the designer, where I'll be going into a lot more details of the designer. We're only going to show just a few features today. But if you want to know more, you can come to that session. In that session, we're going to be working in an application built in C#. But every single feature that you see in the designer works in C++. So for those of you who may have been using different presentation frameworks or different UI, you might find that dragging and dropping and visually editing your application a little bit more efficient than you've had in the past. Another really exciting thing about the designer that I want to tell you about today is that not only have we updated the designer to work for C++, but we've also implemented a new designer in Visual Studio for this release, which is built on a shared architecture with Expression Blend. So what that means is that UI components that are common to both products, like object creation and property editing and layout, are now the same in both products. So why is this really great? How many people have used the XAML Designer in Visual Studio 2010? So you're going to get, the good news is that if you're used to the designer and there's things that you like, well, I want to be able to do these 5 tasks, and that's what I could do before. We're still going to be supporting all of those tasks, but now you have a few extra benefits of some of the features that were previously only available in Expression Blend. Now they're also going to be available in Visual Studio around those core scenarios. So as you can see, there's some of those that I highlight on the slide. So over the next couple minutes, the next thing I wanted to talk to you about here, oh, wait, before we're going to jump into the demo, the one thing I wanted to mention, just to make sure everybody understands. So it's really important to understand that the XAML that you're going to be editing and using in your application, there's no overhead for the XAML. XAML is written directly on top of DX for the C++ implementation. So you don't have to worry about, is there overhead for me using XAML? Is that going to have any negative implications? And the answer is no.
It's just native all the way. All right.
OK, so let's go ahead and get started building out our app. So here we are in Visual Studio. And as you can see, we have a WYSIWYG designer up at the top that's given us a rendered view of the document that's open. On the bottom, we have a XAML text editor. And we have your familiar Solution Explorer. So we're going to open a few more windows that we're going to want to use to edit our application. The first is the toolbox. And that lists all of our controls that we have access to. And right now, it's pinned up. So we'll just go ahead and dock that, because we'll be using it pretty frequently to add objects to the scene. The next view that we'll want to have is the document outline. And that's available under the View menu, under Other Windows, Document Outline. And this gives you a list of all of the XAML objects in your scene for the currently open document. So there it is. We pinned it below the toolbox. There's one more view that we want to grab and make use of, and that's the property window. So now that we can see all the objects selected, we want to see what are all the properties for the currently selected object. And that's what that panel shows you. For those of you who've used Blend, you might already see some similarities here. Already the document outline looks a little bit more Blend-like. We have some styling work that we'll be finishing. This is a preview release. So the styling is definitely a work in progress. But so you can see I have the nice eyeballs, the Blend eyeballs. So now we have our workspace all configured. Let's get to building out the structure of our application. The first thing that we'll do is we're going to add a list view control, because we're going to have a list of songs. And we'll add that right into the area that Vikas has highlighted. So he grabs a list view from the toolbox, and he simply draws it out in the designer. And as you can see, you get interactive feedback that's showing you the width and the height of the object as you're drawing it out. So once he's done that, now one of the things, remember I was telling you about that auto size feature. Well, one way that you can quickly say, hey, I want this list view to always be the size of the stack panel that's its parent, is to simply right-click and choose.
I just did auto size.
Oh, and he just did it. So, it's so easy to use that even Vikas can do it without me having to tell him how to click the auto size button.
Right after this, we get into C++, and then, All right.
Later, I'm going to have to type code, so it could get scary. But all right, so we've auto-sized it, and that's great. And that was really easy to do in a designer when you want to draw it out. But now we want to add an item to that list view. So let's do that in the XAML text editor. So he's just going to go ahead and start editing the markup and add the different, so we have tag completion. Now as he's typing this up, you're going to get full IntelliSense to allow you to edit that XAML directly. So we'll add a list view item and complete it. And then, let's set a property in here. Let's set height to, say, 100 pixels. Still a work in progress. Sometimes the IntelliSense might be a little bit flaky, but for now, we'll just keep going with it. And now we've completed that. And then once the designer refreshes and registers all the new objects, we'll be able to see it in the document outline. And then now you can see I have a stack panel. Let's open that up. The one below. Yeah. So now you can see I have that list view item. So we want to work in the list view item. We want to edit it. But it's kind of far away and small. So let's zoom in and get a better view of what we want to edit. So what you can do in design, let's grab the pointer tool, actually, just to go ahead and grab the pointer tool in the toolbox. Just sort of click in there and zoom in and use the mouse wheel. So the way the mouse wheel works in the designer is that you just point where you want to go and you zoom in using the mouse wheel. It's a really easy way to get at exactly what you want to edit. So now that we have a better view, let's just show them how to pan. If once you have the zoom level you want, sometimes you just want to pan around. So you can press the space bar and pan your view. So now let's grab a grid, because we want to have a little structure to this application, and the grid is a really great control that has a lot of those advanced layout capabilities that we want to take advantage of. So we'll grab it from the toolbox, and again, just simply draw it out. And I have a feeling that, because it's going to race to getting the auto size in there. Auto size is like your best friend in a lot of the designer scenarios. So once that is all matched up the way we want it, we're going to add a couple columns to this grid. And as you can see, right when you hover over the top of the grid, you get an adorner that tells you exactly where it's going to go when you click. So let's go ahead and add that column. And then we're going to add another column a little bit. We'll just wait to that accept, and then we go to the end, create another one. That easy to create that structure. Now, by default, the grid has a couple different ways that it can resize and control the content within that column. In this case, we want both the column on the left and the column on the right to be a fixed pixel size. And we can change that really easily by hover over one of the grid columns, and you get a menu, and you can choose pixel. So we'll choose pixel for both columns on either end. Looks great. So that's just a little bit. So what you can do now is we wanted a very particular size. So you can then just adjust the column width directly on the design surface. And as you see, you're getting feedback. So we're going to just change that to about 70 pixels on the left column and then 70 pixels on the right column. So now we have our basic structure in place. Things are going to be laid out the way we want in the grid. So let's start filling out the details in each column. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to add a nice image into that first column. And we'll do that by grabbing an image from the toolbox and drawing it out into that area. So he's using this really great feature. I love the search feature in the toolbox. It's not part of the designer. It's part of Visual Studio, so we can't take credit for that. But it's really makes it much easier to grab the items that you want to use. So now we have an image, and we want to edit some properties of this image. And the way we do that is in the Property Inspector. So under the common category, you can see there's a property called source. And that gives us a list of all of the image files that have already been added to our project. And in this case, we already have an image. So we'll go ahead and add that. So that looks pretty good. For the purposes of the session, that's good enough for me. So let's move on to the middle. And in here, what we want to have, in the middle, we want to have a stack of text blocks that have information about that song. So we're going to use the stack panel control, because that will just nicely lay out the text blocks one on top of each other. So we'll grab the stack panel from the toolbox and simply draw that out. And notice as he's drawing, you get snapping and adorners that give you a little bit of padding. It shows you how far away you are from the different columns, and it really allows you to get sort of a precise control right on the design surface. And you know what? I think that looks fine just the way it is, because I have a nice even margin on either side and on the top and bottom. So we're going to add a text block. But in this case, rather than drawing out a text block, we're just going to double-click in the toolbox to get a default text block. Now, I can't see it because the default text block has a foreground color of white. Well, we want to change that. And the way we do that is in the Property Inspector. But in this case, we're going to use the brush category. As you can see, I have a foreground brush. And you can just play around with a color picker and see what color you might want to use. Or if you happen to have a very specific hex value that you know you want to use, you can also simply type that in. Now, after he types this in, this gray color has been specified, and it's the gray color that we must use. So one way that we can save that for later is to create a resource out of it. So the way you do that is up by the brush, there's an advanced options menu that gives you several choices. And in this case, we're going to choose Convert to New Resource. And it gives us a dialog, and we can give it a name. We'll call it Font Foreground Color. And in this case, we're just going to be working in this file, so we'll save it in this context. But we could choose an application context so that we could use it across different XAML files on our project as well. So now that we have that, let's set the text to something a little more interesting than text block. Let's see. Song name, that's a good choice.
Thank you.
I like that. So, but that styling doesn't quite look right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and change the font. And what we do is in the property inspector, there's a category called text. And that groups together all of the text categories, text properties that we're interested in. So we can change he already changed the font to Sicko UI Light. And then let's make it a little bigger, say 22 pixels. All right, that looks better. So now we're going to add one more text block. And we'll just do that with double click again. And again, I can't see it. But this time, we're going to use that lovely gray color that we've saved off. And to apply that resource to this text block, we just select it. And then in the property panel, under the brushes, if you scroll up a little bit, the last tab is the resources. So it gives me a list of all the resources in my project so I can see a little swatch and select the one that I want to apply. So we could change the name on that one too if you want, or leave it the same.
I got a good name here.
OK. I don't know what he's going to type. It's very exciting. Artist name. OK, that was fun. So now we have that all set up the way we want. Let's go ahead and add we want to add a button so that when we click it, it plays the song. So we'll add that button into the last column. So we're going to go ahead and select, you know what? Why don't we select the parent grid? And let's use that neat feature of the designer that I showed you earlier, where if you press the Control key and you right-click to something in the designer, press Control and hold it, and then right-click, you get a list of all of the elements directly below the mouse position. It makes it really easy to select the object. You're like, I know it's here somewhere. I just don't know exactly where it is. This gives you a nice way. So we'll select that parent grid. Now we can go ahead and grab a button from the toolbox and draw it out into that area. So this project, we already have created a style that we want to use for all our buttons. And a style is essentially a set of property values that can get applied to a particular type of object. So in this case, it's a button style. Now, I always forget where the style property is in the property, which category. But that's OK, because I know the name of style. I've been using XAML for a while. I don't need to sort of scan the list. So you can simply use the search feature and start typing in style, kind of like the toolbox. And that filters the property view to just those properties. Now he can go ahead and select that image button style, which it only shows the resources that are appropriate to that property type. And that looks great. I think the next thing we want to do is add an image to that button. So we'll grab an image. In this case, we'll draw it out. And then just set the source to, I think we have an image in this project called Play2.
Did we say developer preview?
OK, so now we have our image. But in order to make this come to life, we need to attach an event so that it calls our handler that actually plays the song, which we're going to fill out later. And the way we can do that is selecting the button first. And you can do that in the document outline or on the design surface, which you did. And then click the Events tab. And the Events tab just gives you a list, just like the properties, but a list of all the events for that object. And when the user clicks that play button, we're going to call the onPlay song. onPlay song?
onPlay song.
onPlay song function. So he just types that in. And when he hit enter, it's going to bring it up.
So as you can see, there's a header file that it maps to, and there it is. But there's something else that we forgot to do.
What did we forget?
We did not.
We have to rename.
Yes.
So because in Code Behind Later, we're going to reference that list view that we added. We're going to give it an ID. We're going to give it a name. And you can do that directly in the document outline just by choosing the list view, right-click, choose Rename, and do Song List Box. Very good. That would have been a bummer.
Well, it's good.
Okay, so let's go back to the PowerPoint for a second. I just want to just quickly recap a little bit, what we were showing you with the designer. It's just a few features, and like I said, come to my session tomorrow if you'd like to hear more. But the really cool thing is that there's certain things that are just easier to do visually. When you're trying to fine-tune your layout, when you're experimenting with property settings, and using a designer can make that a lot easier to do. There's other times where you just really want to type XAML. You don't want to deal with a designer. You know what you want to type in, and the XAML text editor allows you to do that. So I think that's about it. I think that now I'm going to hand it over.
I think you have one more slide, don't you?
Oh, that was the slide I just went over.
Oh,
Yeah,
you did?
there you go.
Okay.
Lots of benefits.
All right. All right. So now that we're talking about developing C++, let me just do a quick overview of C++ for the Windows 8 runtime. There's a talk right after mine that I'm going to run to. It's Herb Sutter's talk. If you should go and listen, it's 213B, I think. Yes, thank you. You should go for that, and he's going to go into a lot more detail on the Windows runtime and C++. But basically, what we are providing is a set of language extensions and libraries to allow direct consumption and authoring of Windows runtime types. It's a strongly typed system, automatically ref counted, exception-based. You've been using STL all these years. There's a deep integration with STL. And there's a well-defined binary contract. So if you're calling from JS to C++, C# to C++, and 415 different ways of doing things, there's a well-defined contract between these WinRT types. All right. The language
Do you want to repeat the
syntax
question, maybe?
Oh, yeah. The question was, how similar is the syntax to C++ CLI? Or the syntax is quite similar. I don't know if it's 100% similar, but it's not. Yeah. But the syntax is quite similar to C++ CLI. We'll talk more towards the end, if you don't mind. All right. So let's go into demo. So what have we done so far? Right? We've Joanna's designed the user designer. She's given me a play button. She has given me an event that will fire, and I would need to capture that event and do something with it. If you remember the Magical Music app we had before, when we tapped the play button, we actually went to the player page, and that's when the blocks started coming down. And that's the hooking up we're going to have to do now. So out here, what we're doing is, first thing we need to do is we need to ref up a new song. So what she's doing is she's setting up a current song, and this is the new syntax, ref new. So ref new is a keyword that we've added that allows activation of WinRT objects from C++. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to set up a new delegate. So what she's doing is, for the current song, she's going to add the event, which is the song load completed event. And she's going to use this new syntax, plus equals. And she's going to set up a song loaded completed delegate. So what this means is, when my song finishes loading, call this function, which is called onSongLoaded, in the same file up there that you see a little bit up. So now that we've set up the delegate, we've set up the event, we actually need to load the song, which is what she'll do next, which is just load the song, which is the file name. We're getting the file name from line 85 and 86, right? So say the event is fired, the delegate has done its job. We're going to go up to line, I don't know, up a bit, like line 80, and we're going to actually set up the player page instance. So we have a player page instance already set up in the file. We're going to initialize it. What this initialization is doing is it's setting up the keyboard, it's setting up the blocks, it's setting up the animation, so that when the page is loaded, we can actually do the transition onto that page. But we actually need to set up the current context of the window to be that player page instance, which is what she's going to do next. So she's going to get the current window, and she's going to set the context to be that player page instance. And once that is done, we're going to activate it. So we get the current page again and just activate it, right? So let's press an F7, build. So while this is going on, what did we just do? Go back to the home page over there. How did that get in the bottom? Can you minimize the toolbox in the document outline? We don't need that
Oh,
right
yeah,
now.
I'll get rid of that.
Get more real estate. All right, so what do we do here? In the IDE for WinRT, we've added new IntelliSense. So you saw the IntelliSense working for you. We have automatic member list, filtering of your IntelliSense. One of our PMs from our team, Sumit, actually has a blog post on VC Blog that you should go and read, where he goes into a lot more details on the IDE enhancements. We also have reference highlighting, where she clicks the current song, and you see, I'm a visual guy, I need to see where all my variables are. Semantic colorization is also there, so if you see the arguments to the function, those are properly colorized. And this other feature I won't get into is code snippets. So you can have, C++ now has code snippets, right? How awesome is that? You can use that. And beyond the IDE, since you're the C++ audience, let's go a little bit deeper. So she did the show all files over there. So you're familiar with when C++ compiles, you get a debug folder, release folder. That is the same. But what was the name of that ID that you added? Song list?
Song list box.
Song list box. So step back a bit. This XAML file, that XAML file gets compiled by a XAML parser. If you're familiar with Windows Phone 7 development or Silverlight, it's similar. The XAML file gets compiled into, for C++, G and CPP files, which is what that is. And what she's doing, she's searching for song list box. So the ID that we added back in XAML is what this compiled into, and the header file is actually showing the name of the list view. So this is the native stack all the way, right? So you do your design in XAML, gets compiled to C++ and then header files. And over here, while we're not going to get into this, we're using partial classes over here. C++ now has partial classes. Herbstock will probably cover a bit of that. Okay, build is completed. Let's do an F5.
Yeah. Should we set a breakpoint now? Or do you
Yeah,
wanna
let's do a
wait?
breakpoint.
Yeah.
So let's go to home page, set a breakpoint on, say, 88 or 99 or whatever.
How about on the
Yeah.
index?
Yeah,
'Cause,
let's
you know, I'm kind of curious what the index might be set to later.
All right, let's do an F5. So the app is launched, and it's launched. And ignore the loading part. So that's the song name, artist name that we added in XAML. We've hooked the play button, so let's hit play. Oh, okay, breakpoint. Let's press F10. All right, so your debugging experience is the same. You have the same autos, locals, call stacks, everything that you're used to. Just remove the breakpoint and continue. And the app is loading. So now when the streaming actually happens, we should be able to play something. Let's play some more.
Uh-oh. That's not good.
Okay, this is the setup, right? So let's go back to Visual Studio. Let's stop debugging. So what's happening is when you actually tap the keyboard, we play a sound, and it's a sine wave. It goes up, it plays a song, then it has a trailing edge until the wave file finishes. So the UI thread is locked in that time. You cannot do anything else. When that wave finishes, something else will start playing. That's not how a keyboard should work, obviously. We're going to fix that. So let's open wavefile.cpp, assume, here. Let's do a find for the play function that I've set up already. So on line 127 is when I'm doing the play, but it's happening on the same thread, which is what I want to change. I want to show you something else that I found really valuable, which is the object browser. So the APIs are kind of new, and while I was using C++, this has been invaluable to me to figure out what are the APIs and what is their signature, and this is pretty cool. And you can always go back to ILDASM, right? So let's search for thread. And there's a thread pool API that we're going to use. It takes a iasync action call, and so let's go back to wavefile and add that in. Comment line 127 out, or do that
I
first.
think I'm going to add that namespace.
All right, let's do that. So namespaces have always been there in C++. Win32 APIs were kind of flat, but now we have namespaces for that too. I think Alesh covered that in his keynote. So we're going to add the Windows system threading namespace, and we're going to use the thread pool down a bit. So what are we going to do? We have an async section, async action already set up, and we're going to use the thread pool run async call, which is what she's writing right now. So the async action will, okay, thread pool. So we're going to make this run async call, and we're going to ref new work item handler. What that work item handler is going to do is it's going to get the play instance that we already have set up, and it's going to also get the play function that we want to get called on each of these thread pools. The next line is kind of interesting, is we want the callback context of this thread pool to be any rather than the same UI thread, which is what she's going to do next, I believe. Yep. So the callback context for this thread is not going to be on the UI thread when this async action actually happens. Now that that's done, let's start the async action, which is very important. And I believe that should fix our problem. So let's press F5. Yes, right after mine, Herb Starters. And there's a bunch of others. If you want a deeper dive, Dion sitting in the front row has a chalk talk as well. Tarek somewhere in the back has a tips and tricks on how to use the new APIs. And let's play the play button. And hopefully this time, we should have fixed it. So this has not always worked in our preps.
Are you ready?
Yes, let's do it.
Whee!
All right. Good job. So let's go back to the code. Let's stop debugging. So every debugging that you've seen so far is the full screen local debugging. There's two other modes. If you remember Kiran and Chris's talk from yesterday, where we did the remote debugging on a tablet. That's what the third option is, the remote debugger. We won't get into that. We'll talk a bit about the simulator. So let's choose the simulator and press F5 again. So why would you use a simulator? So did it launch yet? Okay.
It's launching.
It's launching. I'll come back to line 131 later. So what this is it's a remote desktop into your own machine, right? Anybody seen Inception? Dream within a dream? So this is a remote desktop into your own machine. And why would you use a simulator? To me, it's kind of cool because say I'm sitting on my desktop at work and I don't have a tablet. I can turn around and see the effect of the orientation, etc. So they've got nice orientation changes that you can do. You don't have a touch laptop or a touch screen. You can simulate all that. The other thing that I find really cool is the one at the bottom, which is changed resolution. So I don't have a 27-inch monitor, but my app will be run most likely on a 27-inch monitor. I want to see what it looks like. And that's actually something we ran into when we were creating the app. The bottom keyboard is the one that we were like, oh, we didn't think about that one. Then we had to change our design a little bit to make sure that our app displays correctly on all these different resolutions. Jensen's talk was pretty interesting, wasn't it? Pretty cool. All right, so I think that's it on the simulator. Let's close that out. So you don't necessarily need to shut down the simulator. It can remain open. So next time when you start, it'll just launch in the simulator. Line 189, can you scroll to that a bit? Or maybe not.
Oh, you mean?
Yeah, so there was a false squiggle there. It's a false squiggle, developer preview. So the next thing we were going to talk about was the package manifest. So what have we done so far? We've designed our app. We've developed our app. Now we want to finish our app. And that gets done through the package manifest or the manifest designer. Over here, this is what Visual Studio and Windows 8 uses to understand your app, right? So there's a name, there's a logo that you can use, a fancy logo, which is what we saw when we first started. You can show a name, Vikas Rocks. All right, and the one thing I want to show you about is capabilities. So remember when I said what this app actually does? It plays sound, and it listens to the sound. So it's using the microphone. but since it's using the microphone, we need to tell Visual Studio and Windows 8, hey, I'm going to be using the microphone capability. So you need to remember to enable the capabilities that you're going to be using. In the declarations where we are not using any contracts here, contracts would go in there. I mean, I could possibly imagine a shared contract here where I want to share my music to everybody. And that's pretty much on the manifest designer. So we've made our app look good. What do we do next? We package it, we put it on the App Store, or give it to a QA to test, right? So while the store is not available yet, we have a Create App package down there. And when the store is available, you'll be able to choose the first option, and it'll go somewhere. It'll ask you for a live ID and everything. Let's go next. So over here, this is the location of where our package is actually going to be packaged up in this new non-installer world that we are in. What's important for us is that checkbox over there which says include public symbols. So as C++ developers, we want symbols for our app, right? So PDBs to PDBs get packaged with the app. So we're not going to click next and cancel. We're not going to do the packaging right now. It takes a few minutes. But we already have that built out over there in the packages folder. That's where the package would get created. And in there, the top two are the artifacts that will get created by the package operation. So the first is the debug_test folder, or build is debug. Man, that sounded loud. And let's go into that debug test folder. So this is the folder you would give somebody who doesn't have Visual Studio Express on their machine to run your app. If you right-click the add app, the batch file and run as admin, that'll install that app on your machine, on your tablet, and you can run that. What's interesting about C++ is the dependencies folder. When you go into that, you'll see the dependency to the CRT and the VCLibs, right? The debug VCLibs in this case. So we'll package that for you. You don't need to think about this when you're creating your app, but you're a C++ audience. You need to know what's going on behind the scenes. This is what's happening. Let's go back a level. Let's go up a level. One more. The second was the Apex upload. We've already renamed it to a .zip. And let's go into the .zip. So this is what your app is being packaged into. Inside the Apex folder, you will find, and if you rename that to .zip again, you will find your XAML file, your .exe, any assets or resources you have, your logo, everything gets packaged together. And in the Apex sim is where your symbols get packaged. And all of this together gets sent to the store. So we did the package, we did packaging. The last part I want to cover is code analysis. So code analysis is a new addition to Visual Studio Express. Thank you very much. It's a new addition to Visual Studio Express, and Jason sitting out there is largely responsible for this. We've already run code analysis on this app, so let's click the first one. So this is obviously a code analysis bug, right? We're using uninitialized variables, and the cool thing is it runs on platform, : vector, which is the new minority type, as well as your std vectors that you've been using for all these years. Let's see the second one, right? It caught that error. What does it say? It's not uninitialized. So what you can do is you can actually suppress that warning. So if you go there and you can suppress in source, it puts a pragma warning suppress in there, so you won't run into it again. How cool is that, right? But again, do not do this for demo purposes only. That's the error that you should. You don't want your users to run into this at runtime, so do not do this. Don't do as I say, I guess. So that was the demo. So let's do a recap. We have first-class support for C++ for Windows Metro-style apps. Right? We have a new XAML designer. We have XAML that compiles to C++. You can have excellent-looking apps now, right, with the help of XAML. And you have the power of C++ with you to access the Windows runtime. We talked a little bit about the async nature of APIs, and somebody had a question, but we'll talk about that in other talks. This talk doesn't go into too much detail, but the async nature of APIs is quite important because you don't want to block your UI while your app is doing something. We don't do the spinning wheels anymore, right? And talked about the IDE improvements. We talked about the 3 kinds of debugging that you can do. The local full screen debugging, alt-tab back and forth between your app and Visual Studio. Talked about the simulator, its advantages that you can use, and remote debugging. I've tried remote debugging, and you should try it when your tablets that they gave you. It's actually very neat. MSVS Mon and all of the problems that we had before, no more. It actually works very well. We talked about packaging your apps and code analysis. There are some other new areas for C++ developers that we are not covering in this talk. The first one is AMP. Daniel Moth back there has a talk on Friday that goes into that you should absolutely go and see. It's basically writing straight C++ code that you can run on your GPU. And it's amazing, right? I mean, I love that feature. Localization. There's a new way to do localization now for Windows 8. It's XAML XUID based. Tim Hewer has a talk on it. I'm not sure when. Unit testing. In Dev 10, we did not have unit testing for C++. In Dev 11, we've added unit testing for the Metro-style apps, and we have it in VS Express. So when you go to File New Project, there is a new unit test project. And I think Peter Provost has a talk on that. Profiling. Profiler was a Pro Plus SKU feature before, but we've added CPU-based profiling to VS Express. We are not going into that either, but you can learn more about it on the blogs or wherever, that we can cover that out. But, yep, related sessions. Second one is yours, right?
Yes.
Yes.
504.
504. And the one right after 532 is where Herb's doing the talk, and I'll be running to right after this. And there's other chalk talks by Ali and a couple of people in our team that you should go and listen to. This gives you a lot more detail. This was more of a lap around. You know, you do a file new project, you write your app, package it, and everything. So these talks can give you more information.
All right. So as with any good preview release, we have an update. So there was a late-breaking bug in the designer that we put a patch up. So you can download it from there. Basically, the problem is that sometimes your mouse release kind of gets lost in. Actually, I want to tell a little bit. Since we have a couple minutes, there's something that I want to talk about with the designer, which if people are familiar with the designer, it's kind of a cool thing. What we've done is we've implemented the designer in a separate process. And what that means is that from a user perspective is that, first of all, it's going to be taking up less of the address space of the application, but also that the designer process now is more insulated from the rest of Visual Studio. So in Visual Studio 2010, you could actually get in situations where if the designer had a problem, or let's say you wrote some code that got executed on the design surface, it could actually bring down Visual Studio. So one of the things that we've done is isolated it into its own process. Now, for any of you who have written multi-threading applications, you know that there's sometimes issues when you're trying to communicate across processes, and so one of them that we had was with handling of mouse events. So anyway, the short story is that grab this patch if you're going to use the designer, because otherwise you'll be trying to click on things and it won't release the mouse, and it'll be a little bit frustrating, and we don't want you to think that that's intentional. So the link here has a download where you can grab those updated bits.
Are you going to publish it on the blog?
That's an excellent idea.
Okay.
I think that we'll put a blog post up to sort of talk about this as well. It is on Connect, actually. That's where that link points to.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the second one is since somebody mentioned the new syntax and everything, our UX guys are actually doing a study in the Hilton, 4th floor of the Hilton. It's right opposite, I believe. Just go there, and they have a few questions they want to ask you. And we want to get your feedback, right? We want to know, this is a developer preview. We want to know what you think about the design, what you think about the APIs. And we'd love to get your feedback. I guess the next slide is documentation. You can get that from the presentation. But you can always contact us, or you can go to the UX study and give them their feedback. But I think that's all we have. It's actually going on for the entire duration of the convention. Actually, let me go back if somebody wants to take a note of where it is. So
we have time for
questions.
If you could use the microphone,
Yeah,
actually, because
please.
the session's being recorded.
If it's too far away from you, I'll repeat it. Don't worry about it.
So right
Hang on,
now,
good question.
so at Build, we're releasing the XAML Designer in Visual Studio, and that's what we're introducing today, so that's all we're talking about.
Yes? Sure. Or you can just talk on the microphone.
Actually, thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask my questions here. Actually, I was following through this. While following, I had several doubts, like, can Visual Studio 11 build desktop apps for Win 7 and Vista operating systems?
Yes, but Visual Studio Express is only for Windows 8 Metro style applications. The Pro and Ultimate SKUs, you can use that to create your, the old Win 7 or even the Windows 8 desktop applications.
WPF and Silverlight applications are supported in Visual Studio 11 in the Ultimate. Yeah, Ultimate.
Okay.
And Ultimate is available for download on MSDN.
Okay. And then how we used to have independent installers for Vista and Win 7 operating systems for our device applications. For instance, for Connection Manager applications, we used to have our own installers where registry is used, and also the uninstaller will register itself into the applications software in the control panel.
Are you talking about the Visual Studio installer or the installer that Visual Studio creates?
Installer which we create for the applications.
Okay.
So how it is going to behave if the same installer is run on a Windows 8 box?
So are you trying to create a Metro style app or are you trying to create a desktop app?
No, just wanted to make sure whether the old applications are still running on Windows 8 or not.
Yes, the old applications still run in Windows 8. Your classic Win 7 applications, like on my tablet over there, I've got Outlook running, which is Outlook 2010, and I've got other apps that I use.
So even Skype I can install?
I'm sorry?
Even Skype application can be installed?
I haven't tried Skype,
Okay.
so I don't know.
Right, thanks. And
I'm sorry?
There's a current batch of Skype and developed release, but otherwise it should be
Okay.
yeah.
Does anybody have other questions? I don't want to hog the questions.
I had one quick question. The one thing on the poster that we've been seeing where they kind of put .NET WPF way over here, right? And then you see WinRT, it was very quiet on DirectX. And so I
Yes.
just want to make sure, because I'm just getting into C++ in this type of area. We're talking about leveraging the power of C++. When I've always thought about it as a visual programmer, I think about the fact that I can, in the old last week, right? C++ let me get to deeper DirectX. Right now, though, it seems like it's binary, at least right now. If I'm going to do C++ plus XAML, I cannot, in the same visual space, also do C++ with a DirectX.
That is not right. I'll cut you.
Okay, good.
So if you do, I don't know, do you have Visual Studio still open?
Yeah.
Could you tap over that?
It's just been very confusing because I'm new to the whole thing, but as a creative programmer,
you
I'm
should-
excited about it, but
Let's do a file new project. And let's go to C++. Yep, so you see the DX application at the bottom?
yeah.
You still create DX applications for,
Yeah, so I know I can do that, but from
Are
that
you
DirectX,
asking
can
if
I
you
use a XAML
overlay
control?
XAML on top of DirectX?
Yeah, because exactly,
Not
because in
yet.
real world experiences with business apps, right, I want
Not
all my
in-
developers doing the
Yeah,
interfaces
today,
with XAML.
today
Not
we're
today.
just, they're sort of separate.
Yeah,
Not
today it's not today, but hopefully you
we
guys are
cannot
working
talk
on
about the future.
it. Okay, but I can go to La Jolla and be yelling at it.
It's good
You're
feedback,
free to
though.
do what you want.
Thanks
Well, then
for
I
the
will go and give the
We'll take
feedback. How
that.
about
We'll
that?
take that back to
Yes, thank you
the
for the
planning
feedback.
process.
And we should talk after this.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Thanks, John.
Sure.
And one last question.
Yes.
Actually, like device applications which should run all the time, like showing the statistics, for instance, the connection manager, which maintains the connection and keeps the connection, tracking the thresholds and so on. Such an application, if it is moved out of focus and if it goes into suspend mode, and after some time, if the operating system terminates it, it's not going to be a very good solution. Is there any form of...
So this is not particularly applies to only device applies to all Metro style applications. There are events that you can subscribe to on suspend, on termination, I think, and you have 5 seconds, I believe, to persist your state to the system. So the next time you come up, it's the same model as Windows 4.
Yeah, and they were talking about that at the big session, one of the big sessions, big picture sessions, where really the recommended practice now is that your application is constantly saving its state. That you really don't want to wait for the event because you might not have enough time to. So it's really part of writing great Metro-style apps is to adopting to some of the new ways that applications are suspended and launched. And so it may require thinking a little bit about how you're designing your apps and how they're going to take advantage of the different features of the platform.
So there are SDK samples, C++ samples, and some of them, I believe, have the code to do suspend and resume. So you should check those out.
Okay, thank you very much.
The APIs make it pretty easy, though. I mean, I think you'll find that it's not a huge burden, hopefully.
Yeah.
But feedback is welcome.
Yeah. Please, your question.
Thanks. You sort of started out this session talking about XAML being a very thin layer on a native C++ application, right?
Okay.
So was I looking at a native C++ application?
Oh, yeah, that was a native C++.
Okay, even though it kind of looks like managed C++ code.
Yes.
Okay, and so is the notion of managed C++ code gone in this paradigm?
What's our official answer? Yes.
Am I the only one with this question? I mean, I'll go away.
No.
I had the exact same question, one of my 2 questions.
Yeah. So Tarek, PM on our team, can
That's a great question. So if I understood your question correctly, you're asking, there are sort of 2 parts or 2 ways to look at it. One of them is C++ CLI gone from this kind of application?
From Metro style.
And the second question is C++ CLI gone? And I think these are sort of 2 different questions.
Super.
The first answer is for Metro style applications when you're using XAML. The syntax is kind of similar to C++ CLI, but it's a 100% native application. There is no CLR that's running in the process. The code gets compiled to x86 or ARM or x64.
And that's a garbage collected heap it's using?
No, it is not garbage collected. This is 100% native. You're actually controlling the lifetime. It's WinRT objects, and one specific thing about WinRT objects is that they're ref counted. So they're ref counted object. It's similar to COM. If you're familiar with COM, it's very similar to COM.
Yeah.
So it is not it's 100% native. The second part of it is C++ CLI gone. And no, you can continue to create, classic applications that use C++ CLI to interoperate with C#, and that will always be there. Did that answer your question? But not Metro-style apps. That's right.
So we have C++ CLI IntelliSense that we've added for desktop apps. That there was a lot of feedback about that we addressed.
Okay, and so if I wanted to understand more about the underlying plumbing and the relationship of apps to the framework or the WinRT, what sessions would you recommend?
Right after this, 532.
Here?
And Dion's talk as well. No, 532 is in 213B in the convention center.
Thank you.
And Dion's is when? Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at Salon K, down the hall. I think we can take a few more questions. Please, carry on.
I'm working on a couple of projects that use the parallel patterns library pretty heavily and async agents. Would that mesh nicely? I mean, you showed asynchrony and concurrency using the thread pool, which is great, but would the PPL continue to work with a Metro-style app? Could we, tasks and agents, would they
It will continue to work.
Okay. Yep. Thanks.
two separate questions.
Sure.
One, basically, if you have an application that needs to be constantly collecting, say, statistics off the machine,
That needs to be, sorry?
collecting something off the machine, or
Okay.
a security-related software where you always want it running. I'm assuming you can't have a Metro app that does that. So you'd have to have some other agent, like a service, and then you could have a Metro app that did IPC to it? Or is there a way of enforcing a Metro app that it would actually stay running?
Your Metro app will run as long as it's on the screen.
Okay.
Once it's gone, gets that we talked about suspension and termination. So there is no background processing that I think you're asking for.
Yeah. So essentially, if you wanted that, you'd have to have some other service
Yeah.
that would be doing the
You
work.
still
and
have your
then
desktop
just
apps.
sit on top of it. Okay, perfect. The other one, for the packaging, for like the store and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It seems to be very UI driven. Is there a way of scripting that, or?
Good question. I would have mentioned this in my talk. Everything that we did in this project, are we good? Oh, the question was, is everything driven through the IDE? Can you do it through MS Build? The answer is yes. Even the XAML parser, the packaging, deployment, all of that can be done through MS Build tasks.
Beautiful.
Yep. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, yeah, please.
First of all, some of them were answered already, but I think that I'll post them. Anyway, the first one is what happened then with WPF as a technology, and it was answered already. But
Can you
so
say a little louder?
Excuse me?
Can you talk a little louder?
Oh, what happened to WPF, or Windows Presentation Foundation, as a technology in Windows 8? I know that it is supported as desktop applications and whatever, but not in this paradigm. So what this, my expectation is that Expression Blend spits out Metro type of design, right? That would be my expectation.
So what we're talking about, what we're releasing at Build is that Expression Blend does HTML Metro-style applications. If you
Correct.
want to design XAML-based Metro-style applications, you can use the Visual Studio Designer. If you want to create desktop applications for using WPF, you can still use Expression Blend, or you can use Visual Studio, either one. So
But as a technology, it has stagnated.
the focus of this
WPF.
conference really is about Metro-style apps, but you can
Okay.
still use WPF to create your applications for your desktop.
But as a,
Yep.
but I guess, but as a technology, it's not moving forward. That's what I mean. So the preferred approach is to use, regardless of language, it's to use.
It depends on the kind of
We are-
application
You should
that you're
use what's
building.
best for you.
Yeah.
You should use what's best for your application.
Well, the answer.
I don't want to. Let's talk a little bit. I don't know if somebody has, and we are running out of time. Let's chat a little bit after this.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate it.